should have trusted my gut the second I set foot on that street, but I was too tired, too stubborn, and too used to pushing through discomfort to listen. Competing had trained me to override weakness, to swallow fear and keep moving forward. But that night, in that faded neighborhood with the peeling fences and the feral cat slinking in and out of shadows, I wasn't walking into another tournament. I was walking into something else entirely, though I didn't realize it yet. I told myself all the wrong things. Cheap place one night, you'll survive. But even then, even as I fumbled with the warped wooden gate and heard it screech against the concrete, some part of me already knew I was making a mistake. The air tasted metallic, heavy like pennies left in the rain, and every nerve in my body prickled as if it were already bracing for something I couldn't name. The studio itself looked ordinary, maybe even too ordinary. Lemon cleaner clung to the air, sharp and artificial, the kind of smell that pretends at freshness but only masks what's beneath. I dropped my duffel bag on the floor, and the sound seemed to echo more than it should have in such a small space, like the walls were thinner than they looked. The bed was made, stiff and military tight, a television mounted crooked above a dresser, and a closet with its door slightly ajar, as if someone had looked inside recently and forgotten to close it. Nothing screamed danger, but nothing felt welcoming either. It felt hollow, like a stage set where I was expected to play a role. I texted my girlfriend, told her I'd made it, attached the location pin, because that had become routine for me, like a breadcrumb in case something ever went wrong. She sent back a heart, a little joke about how I'd probably demolish my opponent in the first round, and I told her I loved her. The normality of that exchange settled me for a while, enough to make me laugh when I saw the keypad code for the door. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It was so stupid it had to be harmless. Same with the Wi-Fi password, literally just password. It almost felt like the host was daring someone to break in, though I brushed that thought away as paranoia. I had a way in at dawn, and I needed sleep more than I needed to dissect bad digital security. Still, as I ate lukewarm takeout in silence, the TV murmuring some game show in the background, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The shadows seemed to hang too long in the corners, the air too still, like a house holding its breath. By 9:30, I turned off the lights and lay in bed scrolling through my phone, trying to lull myself into sleep I wasn't sure would come. That's when it happened. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks, deliberate and close, right against the window across from my bed. I froze, every muscle in my body seizing as though my opponent had locked me in some unseen choke. The blinds rattled slightly from the vibration, and I stared at them as if staring hard enough might make whoever was outside vanish. My throat went dry. I managed to croak out a single sound, not a shout, just a shaky, "Huh?" loud enough for anyone out there to know the room wasn't empty. And just like that, the tapping stopped. Silence thickened. I waited, holding my breath, ears straining for footsteps or rustling, but the world seemed to have gone perfectly still. My phone felt slick in my hand as I typed a message to the host. "Hey, was that you at the window just now?" No reply. 10 minutes crawled by, then 15. I started to think maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe exhaustion had finally begun to fracture me. But 45 minutes later, my phone lit up with a message. "Sorry, was going to bring you water but thought you were asleep, so I left." My stomach twisted. Why the window? Why tap instead of knock? Why would anyone bring water to a grown woman at 9:30 at night? I wanted to dismiss it, chalk it up to social awkwardness or cultural difference, but deep down I knew I was lying to myself. My body didn't believe my excuses. My skin stayed cold, the hair on my arms standing on end, as if the room itself had overheard that lie and refused to let me get away with it. Sleep never came. I lay stiff in the dark, phone in hand, every creak of the building snapping me awake like a slap. At some point near midnight, just as my eyelids began to droop, I heard it again. This time not the window, the door. Beep, beep, beep. The keypad was being pressed from the outside. I sat bolt upright, heart thrashing in my chest, every nerve on fire. Beep, beep, Then, click. The lock disengaged. I moved before I could think, barefoot, adrenaline tearing through me, sprinting across the studio and slamming my body into the door as it began to swing inward. The impact rattled the frame. From the other side, a grunt. Low, male. Surprised. "This is my room," a deep voice said, calm, almost bored. Terror sliced through me like ice. "No, it isn't. Get the hell out," I shouted, trying to sound bigger than I was. He paused, then said something that made my blood run colder than anything else. "You'll never make it to the finals if you're too tired to unlock the door." The words hit me like a chokehold cinched too tight. He knew. He knew about the tournament, about why I was here. My voice cracked, breaking into a scream. "I'm calling the police right now." But he didn't sound afraid. Just repeated again. "This is my room." As though the words themselves were a lock he was sliding into place. I braced my body against the door, forcing it closed, and when I glanced toward the window, my only other exit, my breath seized in my throat. It wasn't a window anymore. Not really. The blinds hung still, but through the slats there was no night, no outside, no air. Just a sheet of raw plywood bolted over the glass from the outside, a crooked note taped dead center. Window out of order. George M. I staggered backward, dizziness clawing at me. Trapped. No exit. The room had become a coffin. The footsteps finally retreated, slow and deliberate, like he knew he could come back any time he wanted. Like I wasn't escaping, only postponing. My hands shook so badly it took me 2 tries to lock the deadbolt again. I dragged the dresser in front of the door, the wooden legs scraping against the floor in a scream of protest. My chest heaved, my pulse hammering in my ears. When I dialed 911, I could barely form the words, choking them out between shallow breaths. Someone tried to break in. Someone said it was their room. Someone knows about me. The officers came eventually. Their flashlights swept the small studio, their faces unreadable. I stood barefoot in the corner, gripping a kitchen knife I'd pulled from the drawer, my knuckles white around the handle. One of them, the taller one, muttered to his partner, "Yeah, another weird one here." His voice carried the weight of routine, not surprise. "Another?" I asked. My voice cracked on the word. "Couple calls before," he said vaguely. He didn't elaborate. "Why is it still listed then?" I demanded. He didn't answer. Just suggested I find another place for the night. His tone so detached it felt almost rehearsed, as though he'd said the same line in the same place to someone else not long ago. They waited as I packed my bag, their presence oddly perfunctory, like actors waiting to exit the stage once I finished my lines. When I finally stepped out into the cool night, dragging my suitcase across the uneven pavement, I saw him. Not the host from the profile photo, I'd never seen his real face, but a man standing in the main house window, mid-40s maybe, balding, wearing a white tank top. Just a silhouette lit faintly from behind, one hand gently parting the curtain to watch me leave. I didn't breathe until I was in the Uber, but even then, every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I expected to see headlights trailing too close behind. The driver asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine, but my chest stayed tight, my skin clammy. I knew in some irrational and yet undeniable way that it hadn't been a simple misunderstanding. The timing had been too perfect. The tapping when I would have been at my weakest. The attempted entry when most people would be in their deepest sleep. That wasn't chance. That was design. Later, when I thought back, I remembered details I had overlooked in my rush to get out. The smoke alarm, nothing but a hollow shell. The closet vent that connected directly into the main house wide enough to slip something through. And I remembered the smell, that sharp tang of lemon cleaner. Too strong. Strong enough to cover another smell beneath it. A week later, back home, I was sitting on my couch when my phone buzzed with a notification. An app I didn't recognize. No name, just an icon of a sunflower. My heart stumbled in my chest as I tapped it open. The screen filled with a grainy, shaky video feed. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw my own living room couch, the one I was sitting on, from a slightly higher angle. The title burned across the screen, "The New Roommate," and the feed was live. I've never liked being watched. Even as a little girl, I used to cover the mirrors in my bedroom with old towels before I went to sleep, convinced that something, or someone, on the other side might be staring back at me. My mother thought it was silly, a phase I'd grow out of. My father, when he was around, called it the dramatics. But the unease never left me. It grew with me like a shadow that never quite caught the light, a low hum under my skin, reminding me that privacy is never complete, that silence is never whole, and that eyes can press against you even when a room feels empty. I grew up in Rutland, Vermont, in a house too crowded for secrets. 4 kids, paper-thin walls, parents who worked themselves to exhaustion. I learned early how little of myself was mine. My brothers teased, barged in, rifled through my things. My mother said, "That's just family." But I knew better. I wanted walls that held sound in, doors that locked and stayed locked, a space that was wholly mine, not borrowed or invaded or shared. That craving never left, not through college, not through jobs, not through failed relationships. Solitude wasn't loneliness for me, it was safety. When I turned 37 and finally managed to scrape together enough savings from my job in remote tech support, I left Rutland for a place that promised quiet. Cedar Ridge, New Hampshire, population barely 4,000. It was the kind of town where the postmaster remembered your name after one meeting, and where the diner waitress didn't even ask what you wanted after the second visit, just poured your coffee and smiled like she'd been waiting for you. I bought a colonial-style house just off Mill Street. It was too big for one person, too expensive, creaky, and tired. But it was mine. A white picket fence wrapped around it like a promise, and a massive oak in the backyard bent over it as if shielding it from the world. The floors moaned underfoot. The plumbing rattled like an old man clearing his throat. But every imperfection felt alive, like the house was reminding me that it had stood long before me and would stand long after. The mortgage stretched me thinner than I liked, and it was my sister Leslie, always scheming for side money, who told me about Airbnb. "You don't even have to talk to them," she said, her voice bubbling through the phone. "Clean the room, give them the code, and let them pay you. Easy." I resisted at first. The idea of strangers in my home pressed against that old ache in my chest. But practicality has a way of silencing instinct. The first year was uneventful. A sales rep who stayed one night, a retired teacher who baked cookies for me, couples drifting in for leaf peeping season. Quiet, polite, gone before they left any kind of trace. And then there was Simon. He booked a 3-night stay in early November, just after the tourists disappeared but before the snowbirds began their migrations. His profile picture showed a young man, mid-20s maybe, glasses, neatly cut hair. His profile said he was a freelance writer, working on a project about small towns in New England. That didn't seem unusual. Cedar Ridge was picturesque in a modest way, with its lake, its diner, its long-forgotten mill ruins along the edge of town. He arrived late one gray afternoon, the kind of day where the sky felt like wet paper pressed low over your head. I met him on the porch, out of habit extending a hand. "Cal Thompson," I said, though of course my name isn't Cal. It's Callie, but hardly anyone bothers with the full version. "Simon," he replied, shaking my hand with a grip stronger than I expected. His canvas duffel was the only thing he carried. "Place is yours. First room upstairs on the left. Bathrooms beside it. Wi-Fi passwords on the fridge." He nodded, thanked me, and moved quickly inside. His voice was soft, his eyes quick and darting, like he was measuring something in me or in the house. I barely saw him over the next 2 days. A flash of him in the hallway, a bottle of water taken from the fridge. When I asked where he liked to write, he said, "The park by the lake's nice," without meeting my eyes. That was all. I might have forgotten him entirely if not for the sound on his third night. It was close to midnight. I was half asleep, watching an old Columbo rerun, when I heard it. A scrape, faint but deliberate, wood against wood. At first I thought it was just the wind pulling at the loose gutter out back, but then it came again. Longer, slower. A drag, not a rattle. My skin tightened. I got up, pulled on slippers, and padded down the hall. The light under Simon's door glowed faintly. I knocked. "Everything okay in there?" No response. I waited, then knocked harder. Silence. And then the sound again, soft but inside now, close enough that I pressed my palm flat against the wood, certain I'd feel it through my bones. Something was wrong. I went downstairs, grabbed the spare key from the hook, and returned. As I slid the key into the lock, I froze. From the other side, just beneath the threshold of sound, came the faintest giggle. Not loud, not mocking, soft, almost childlike. My breath caught. My fingers trembled against the cold brass. Whoever was in there knew I was coming. The lock turned, the door swung open, and the room was empty. The bed neatly made, duffel gone. The window wide open, curtains lifting like pale hands in the cold air. And there, near the ceiling, a small black eye stared at me. At first I thought it was an insect, a knot in the wood. But when I stood on the chair and pulled it free, the truth burned through me. A camera, a tiny pinhole device no bigger than a coin. I tore through the room, then the house. Every corner, every frame, every vent. I found another in the bathroom vent, another in a plant on the mantel, another hidden in a hollowed-out book on the shelf. My stomach turned so violently I thought I might collapse. I called the sheriff's office, my hands trembling so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Deputy Fallon arrived 20 minutes later, burly, bearded, slow-talking in that New England way that always felt more deliberate than lazy. He took one look at the devices and let out a low whistle. "Jesus, Callie, you didn't notice these before?" I shook my head. I swear, he must have put them in. But the doubt in his eyes cut deeper than anything. He looked around, scribbled in his notepad. "We'll put out a notice. Chances are he's already gone." They never found him. I changed the locks, bought a security system, gutted vents and baseboards until the house looked skeletal. For weeks I couldn't sleep without the lights on. I stopped renting, stopped inviting anyone in. My sanctuary had been split open like a chest, my solitude gutted. And then the package arrived. No return address, a small box, inside it a flash drive and a note. "For your collection." I told myself not to look. I told myself it was better not to know. But curiosity is its own kind of violence. I plugged it into my old laptop. Dozens of video files filled the screen, neatly dated. Footage of me, cooking, sleeping, reading. But then one video jolted me so violently I had to clamp a hand over my mouth. The camera shifted, just a fraction, but enough to reveal a pale hand steadying it, fingers twitching against the frame. In another clip, as I lay sleeping in bed, the angle widened slightly and a figure moved in the dark corner of the room. Not fully revealed, just the outline of someone standing there, unmoving, watching. The breath in my chest turned sour. The threat wasn't just surveillance, it was presence. Someone had been here inside, breathing my air while I slept. I couldn't breathe. I called Fallon again, but what could he do? No fingerprints, no trace, no link. Just grainy proof that someone had been here, still might be here. Proof that privacy was never mine, not really. I live alone still, in that same house. I've stripped it down, rebuilt it, lined it with locks and detectors and cameras of my own. But the truth gnaws at me in the quiet hours. I hear the floor groan and wonder if it's the house or if it's him, Simon or whoever he was, standing just out of sight. I see the curtains lift though the windows are shut. I wake to the smell of someone else's cologne hanging faintly in the hall. Sometimes when I pass the mirror at the end of the upstairs hallway, I swear I see someone else's reflection slip out a fraction of a second after mine. Tonight, as I lingered there too long, staring into the glass, I saw it again. My face, then another behind it, smiling faintly as though amused at my terror. And then, from somewhere deep in the house, I heard it. The solid, unmistakable click of a door locking. Not opening. Locking. I am not alone. I never imagined our anniversary trip would end with me standing at the edge of a waterfall, soaked to the bone and completely alone, the roar of the water blotting out every trace of the world behind me. It wasn't supposed to be like this. But then, I suppose people rarely marry the monster outright. They just watch the person they once loved slowly peel back the skin and reveal what had been hiding all along. At least, that's what I thought. Now, I'm not sure if Aaron was ever just Aaron, or if I was blind to something far older, darker, something waiting for the right moment to surface. I met him 9 years ago at a music festival outside Asheville, North Carolina. I was 21, reckless and wide open, willing to be consumed by anything larger than myself. He was 28, older, confident, with that lazy southern charm that made the rain feel warmer. Construction worker, hands calloused, shirts forever smelling faintly of sawdust and beer. He made me laugh. He made me feel like I was worth something. That was enough back then. 3 months later, he asked me to move in. Then came the ring. Then the house. Then the quiet, burning resentment that seemed to seep into the drywall itself. He wasn't violent. Not at first. That was never his way. No, his abuse was quieter, sharper, mocking laughter when I cried, silence so thick it pressed into my ribs, the way he'd scroll his phone while I scrubbed dishes as if I were a servant performing for his entertainment. A bruise you couldn't see in the mirror, a slow death. And then I learned about her. Laya. That's what he saved her as in his phone. I pieced it together in fragments, offhand comments, strange hours, lipstick on his jacket. When I confronted him, he laughed, told me I was going crazy. So I stayed quiet, played the dutiful wife, and waited. That's what made this trip dangerous. I'd chosen the Airbnb deliberately, a gravel path swallowed by forest. No neighbors, no cars, no Wi-Fi. A cabin that looked like it had been grown from the trees themselves, dark with rainwater, fog pressing low as if it wanted to smother everything. I told myself it was for us, one last chance to fix things, or at least a clean ending. But even as I steered the car down that path, a part of me already knew it wasn't just the marriage that was rotting. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of cedar and mildew, its bones groaning in the damp. Aaron stretched out on the couch, scrolling, sneering at the chipped wine glasses. At dinner, rain tapping softly on the glass, he accused me of being quiet. I told him I was just thinking. He smirked, like that was the punchline to a private joke. The fight was inevitable. He stood suddenly, rattling the table with just enough force to make me flinch. "Because I wanted you to break first," he hissed before storming out into the night without a coat or flashlight. I waited, staring at the door, feeling the fog press against the windows, thick and deliberate. When I finally checked his phone, hidden carelessly behind the firewood, same passcode, same arrogance, I saw her name again, her heart's, the photo of her in his hoodie. His reply, "I'm telling her this weekend. She's too pathetic to fight it." Something in me went still, sharp, like glass. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I noticed the old iron poker leaning by the hearth and felt, for the first time in years, steady. It took 10 minutes to find him on the trail. He was standing near the overlook, the mist curling around him. He didn't turn when he called back. "You really followed me out here?" His voice sounded wrong, hollow, carried strangely by the fog. I told him he'd left his phone. He turned then, his face blurred at the edges, too smooth, like the mist had started to claim him. He started toward me, hands raised, mock apology on his lips. But as he moved, the trees around us seemed to lean closer, branches creaking in a way that felt like listening. I don't remember making the decision. Just the sound of the poker cracking against his temple, sharp enough to echo. He crumpled, twitching, breath shallow. I dragged him toward the sound of rushing water, boots slipping on moss. Every step seemed heavier than it should have been. I could swear the ground pulsed beneath me, wet earth sucking at my feet as though urging me closer to the drop. At the edge of the waterfall, I knelt beside him. His lips moved faintly, but the words were lost beneath the roar. When I brushed his wet hair back, his eyes flickered open, and for one heartbeat I didn't see Aaron at all. I saw my own reflection, warped in his darkened eyes, grinning with a mouth too wide. I whispered, "This is what you get for underestimating me." Then I pushed. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just disappeared, swallowed by the water like he'd been expected. I should have turned back then, but I stood frozen, the spray cold against my skin, my ears ringing. The forest was too quiet. Even the water sounded muted, distant, as if I were listening from underwater. When I finally staggered back to the cabin, my clothes clinging to me like second skin, I bruised my shoulder, sliced my palm, staged the scene. I called 911. The words spilled easily. He snapped. He hit me. He ran into the woods. I think he might hurt himself. The sobs were real enough. They always are when you're halfway between truth and madness. The search lasted all night. Dogs, drones, officers calling his name into the fog. Nothing. He was gone. They didn't find him. They never will. I moved to Tennessee. New name, new job, therapy twice a month. But the forest followed. I hear the water in my dreams louder than it ever was that night, like it's inside my head. Sometimes when I wake in the dark, I swear I hear boots on the porch, heavy and deliberate. Sometimes my phone buzzes with a text I can't open, just a notification. 3 hearts. And sometimes, worse than any sound, my new apartment fills with a faint smell of sawdust and beer, curling from the corners like smoke, sweet and rotten. It's always when I'm afraid. Always when I think I've left him behind. And lately, when I pass the bathroom mirror late at night, I've started catching a flicker in my own reflection. My face bending into a smile I don't recognize. Lips stretching too wide. Eyes black and endless. The poker was cold in my hands that night. And now sometimes my hands feel that same cold again, as if the metal never left me. Maybe Aaron didn't come back from the waterfall. Maybe I did. I didn't want to go. That's the part I keep replaying. The way I should have said no from the start. How easy it would have been to avoid all of it if I'd just trusted the knot of dread in my stomach. But it was Olivia's birthday, and Olivia always got what she wanted. She'd found the cabin online through some off-brand rental site called Pioneer Stay. Not Airbnb, not Varbo, something obscure enough that it should have been our first red flag. The listing itself was vague. Rustic mountain escape, total privacy, natural spring nearby. No reviews, no map, just a handful of black and white photos. Pine trees crowding together, a porch that looked like it might collapse if you breathed too hard. A loft bed draped in mosquito netting like we were vacationing in Bali instead of Northern California. Olivia was buzzing with excitement, bouncing on her bed while FaceTiming us in a group call. "It'll be perfect," she said, voice sharp with the kind of manic certainty only she could pull off. Phones off, tequila on. "Haley, you need this." She wasn't wrong. My mother had died that February, and since then I'd been moving through life like my veins had been replaced with tar. Therapy didn't help. My boyfriend bailed right after the funeral. I'd stopped returning calls, stopped eating, stopped pretending. Everything felt muffled, empty. Sometimes I caught myself hoping the numbness would never end, because if I started to feel again, I'd have to feel that. So maybe I said yes just to see if I was capable of feeling anything again, even if it turned out to be regret. There were 5 of us in total. Olivia, obviously, the wild one with her neon tongue ring and her refusal to fear anything. Bria, her college roommate, a sharp-tongued skeptic with skeleton earrings that clinked when she laughed. Jules, Bria's younger sister, quieter, always listening more than she spoke. Nikki, my coworker, practical, the one with rules and boundaries. And me, Haley, the one still trying to figure out if there was a version of life worth dragging myself back into. We left early Friday morning, crammed into Nikki's SUV, the trunk sagging with bags of chips, cases of hard seltzer, and a sad pile of groceries none of us would actually cook. The drive was 4.5 hours north, the highways thinning into 2-lane roads, then dirt paths that felt less like roads and more like the forgotten veins of some dead town. By the time the GPS lost signal, we were relying on printed directions Olivia had laughed at when they arrived in the mail. "It's old school," she'd said. "Charming." The final stretch was steep, gravel skittering beneath the tires, branches clawing at the windows. When we finally lurched into a clearing, the cabin stood waiting. Crooked porch, mossy shingles, the forest pressing in on all sides as if to smother it. I felt it immediately, that quiet wrongness in the air, like walking into a room right after someone's had a fight. The front door was unlocked, no key, no code, just a handwritten note taped to the inside. "Welcome guests. Please be respectful. No entry to the basement. Enjoy your stay." "The basement?" Nikki frowned. "I didn't know there was one." "Every horror movie starts this way," Bria muttered, but she laughed and dragged her bag inside anyway. The first few hours blurred into a cliché of girls' weekend chaos. Windows thrown open to let in the smell of damp pine. Olivia blasting Olivia Rodrigo. The irony wasn't lost on her. Margaritas shaken until the power flickered. We drank too fast, too early. For a while the air loosened. I even laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. But even in the soft glow of string lights Olivia had brought, even as I tried to match their laughter with my own, I couldn't shake the sense that something was watching from the tree line. The woods were too quiet. The cabin too still, like it had been holding its breath just for us. That night, drunk and sprawled across the rug, we played Never Have I Ever. Jules, cheeks pink with cider, admitted she once dated a girl who stole her dog. Bria bragged about shoplifting mascara for the adrenaline. Olivia ranted about reincarnation until tears rolled down her face from laughing. It was stupid, harmless, normal. Until Nikki found the ring in the floor. Not jewelry. A metal ring. Rusted. Set flush into the wooden planks beneath the worn rug. She tugged at it experimentally, voice high. "Trapdoor." "Leave it alone," I snapped, too fast, my skin prickling with cold sweat. Bria was already pulling the rug aside. The wood groaned like it didn't want to give way, then lifted with a crack. A square hole yawned open. Stone steps led down into dark. "I thought the note said no basement," Nikki whispered. "Exactly," Olivia said, grinning like a dare. "Which means there's something worth seeing down there." She was already descending before I could stop her, the thin beam of her phone flashlight cutting through dust. My gut screamed at me to stay upstairs, to close the door, to nail it shut. But Bria shrugged and followed, and Jules trailed after her. Nikki and I exchanged a look. I didn't want to be the only one left upstairs. The air below was colder, not damp, not moldy, just cold, like an open mouth breathing on us. The basement was unfinished, dirt walls packed hard, beams sagging overhead. We ducked as the ceiling sloped lower. In the far corner sat a child-sized table. One chair, scattered toys, a plush rabbit with its head torn off, a wooden top stained dark at the handle, a handful of dolls. They weren't the kind of dolls you saw in antique stores. They were wrong. One had no face, smooth as wax. Another had its mouth sewn shut with black thread. A third had hair that looked real. The table itself was carved with symbols, some faint, some deep. Tally marks covered the wall behind it, dozens, then hundreds, gouged into stone. Okay, I said, swallowing hard. We saw it. Let's go. But Olivia crouched, grinning. There's a book. She pulled it from beneath the table, half-burned, stinking faintly of ash. The cover bore one word, scratched in jagged letters, marrow. She flipped to the final page, reading aloud. Mom said the fire would take the evil out of me, but the fire only taught me to move. I'll wear someone new every night. Something inside me nodded. My mother's face flashed in my mind. Gray, still, the hospital bed cold under my hands when I held hers for the last time. I felt a sting in my throat, the familiar guilt that I hadn't been there enough, hadn't done enough. Put it down, I said sharply. This is messed up. Let's go. But Olivia wasn't listening. Her gaze was fixed behind me. I turned. On the dirt floor, blackened wax marked the outline of a candle circle. You guys ever done a seance? She whispered. No, Nikki snapped. Absolutely not. She climbed the stairs, pulling at the trap door. We're leaving. But Olivia smiled, reckless. Just for fun. We'll light the candles, say the words, and laugh about it. And somehow, against every instinct, we stayed. We sat in a circle, 5 candles flickering, shadows bending long across the dirt walls. Olivia's voice was sing-song. Marrow, if you're here, give us a sign. The air shifted, heavy, dense. The candles bent inward, their flames dragged toward the center as if by breath. That's enough, I said, standing. The trapdoor slammed shut above us. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Jules screamed. Nikki threw herself against the stairs, pounding. It's stuck, it won't open. Okay, Olivia said, laugh trembling. Joke's over. But no one was joking. Then Jules made a noise. Wet, choking. She collapsed onto the dirt, convulsing, her back arched so far I thought her spine would snap. Her eyes rolled white, then black. Help her! Nikki screamed, but I couldn't move. None of us could. When Jules opened her mouth, another voice came out. Not hers, lower, layered, like a chorus. And threaded through it, heartbreakingly clear, was my mother's voice. Haley, it whispered. You weren't there when I needed you most. You left me alone. My chest constricted, air snagging. I wanted to scream back that I hadn't left her, that I'd tried, that I still dreamed of her calling for me. But the words died in my throat. Then the voice shifted, sharper. To Olivia. The bathroom mirror last November. You carved your thigh so deep you thought you'd bleed out, and you told the ER nurse it was an accident. You told no one else. Olivia froze, mouth open, color draining. To Bria. Your grandmother's diamond necklace. You pawned it 3 weeks after the funeral. You never told your sister. Bria staggered, clutching her mouth. To Nikki. It was a German Shepherd, on Route 6 the night of May 3rd. You didn't even check if it was alive. Nikki crumpled. How do you... Jules's body bent, eyes dripping black fluid, smile stretching too wide. She turned her head toward me. Haley, she whispered in my mother's voice again. You wanted me gone. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I grabbed the nearest thing, one of the dolls, and swung it hard. Rusted metal cracked against Jules's head. She dropped to the dirt, twitching. The trapdoor creaked open above us. Just like that. We dragged Jules upstairs, her face calm again, brown eyes blinking. Then she screamed, a sound that didn't belong to her, and vomited black fluid across the rug. She thrashed until her voice broke, then went limp. We didn't talk. We just carried her to the car and drove until cell service returned, until we found a hospital. We told the doctors she'd had a seizure. They found nothing wrong. They kept her for observation. That was 3 weeks ago. I visited her yesterday. Jules doesn't speak now. Doesn't look at anyone. She sits by the window, crayons in her hand, drawing the same thing over and over. A circle of candles. A child's table. A ring in the floor. Once, when the nurse left the room, Jules looked up at me. She smiled. Her eyes turned black, just for a second. And in that second, I understood what the book meant. Fire doesn't cleanse. It spreads. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. No number, no alert, just a notification from Pioneer Stay. My stomach flipped. That listing had disappeared weeks ago, taken down right after our trip. I should have ignored it, but I opened it. A new review had been posted. By Jules. The new flesh is quiet, but it's time to move again. Thank you, Haley, for bringing me a new host. I dropped my phone. My hands shook, because maybe my grief had been the invitation all along, the hollow space inside me, the desperate need to feel something, anything. And now, Marrow knew exactly how to use it. I should have turned around the second I saw the house, but of course I didn't. That's the thing about instinct. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It brushes against you like a cold current, easy to dismiss if you're tired, if you're rational, if you've learned to swallow your nerves for the sake of being reasonable. That night, when the gravel crunched under my tires and the trees closed in, I felt it. Something in me stiffened, a subtle warning blooming behind my ribs. But I was 7 hours into a drive, stiff and hungry, and running on the thin fuel of vacation anticipation. I had paid for the Airbnb. I had a confirmation code. I told myself what we all tell ourselves at the start of something bad. You're just overthinking it. I travel alone. Always have. Or at least since I could afford to. Maybe it comes from growing up in a house where solitude wasn't a resource I had much access to. 3 siblings, one parent stretched to breaking. Noise layered on noise until I felt like I lived inside a hive. I remember craving corners, closets, stairwells where I could wedge myself in with a book or a pair of headphones and for a few minutes pretend I was somewhere else. I learned early that silence, real silence, was a gift. And when I got older, had my own job at a little marketing firm that paid enough to give me scraps of freedom, I used that freedom on solo trips. No drama, no compromises, just me and a road and the possibility of quiet. The trip down the Oregon coast had been on my list for years. The plan was neat and deliberate. Start in Astoria, trace my way south through the small beach towns, end in Brookings. For most of the week, I had a cozy little cabin rented, perched above the Pacific, a fireplace and a fire pit and a view that would belong entirely to me. But the cabin wasn't available my first night. I needed a layover inland. Harper's Glen came up in the search results. Cheap, clean reviews, advertised as secluded and peaceful. A whole 2-bedroom house for the price of a motel room. The photos looked bland but fine. Beige siding, porch, pine trees hemming it in. Self-check-in. Private. A perfect stopover. By the time I reached the town, the sun was softening, lowering behind the trees in a way that made the sky look bruised. Harper's Glen was barely a town at all. One gas station with a flickering sign, a diner painted with a faded mural of a lighthouse, a scattering of houses that hunched away from the road. I felt like I'd slipped off the map, even though my phone GPS still showed a blue dot inching forward. The road to the house was gravel, the kind that crunches too loud under your tires, as though announcing you to the trees. The pines were thick, the shadows stretched long, and at the end of the drive sat the house. It looked exactly like the pictures, and yet not. Something about it seemed stiff, the kind of stiffness you see in a photograph of a house, not in a house itself. I parked, killed the engine, sat for a moment with my hand still on the wheel. The rocking chair on the porch had paint peeling off in uneven chips. The beige siding had a faint greenish tint, mildew threading upward from the bottom. I felt that whisper again. Don't. But I was too practical, too stubborn. It was late. I was tired, and I wasn't about to eat the cost of a prepaid night over a feeling I couldn't name. The lockbox code worked fine. The door opened with a sigh of stale air, cool and damp, the smell of a space that hadn't been lived in for a while. I stepped inside and did what I always do. A walkthrough. Living room with a sagging floral couch, boxy television, scratched coffee table, kitchen with humming fridge, twin bedroom neat and bare, queen bedroom with a faded patchwork quilt, closets empty, bathrooms empty, everything in its place, clean, generic, and yet my skin prickled as though I had just walked into someone's diary. I told myself it was the silence. There were no neighbors, no cars passing, not even the faint hum of a distant highway. Just crickets and the occasional rustle of branches. Too quiet. My brain, tuned to city noise, pulsed against it like an ear pressed to a vacuum. I dropped my bag, changed into sweats, and sank onto the couch. My plan had been to order dinner, but every place that delivered closed at 8. Small town rules. I chewed a granola bar, scrolled my phone, eyelids heavy. That's when the doorbell rang. It was sharp, metallic, wrong. The kind of chime that sounds like it comes from deeper inside the walls, not from the porch. I dropped my phone, heart leaping so hard it hurt. Nobody had passed me on the road. No neighbors close enough to wander over. Yet someone was at the door. I didn't move. I just listened. 2 voices, low and hushed, bleeding through the thin walls. "Are you sure she's in there?" "What if—" I backed into the hallway, phone trembling in my hand. No deadbolt, no chain, just a knob lock. Then a voice, clear and casual, called out, "Hey, we're here for the Airbnb. Can you open the door?" It wasn't just the words. It was the tone. Too friendly. Forced. Like an actor pretending to sound normal, but not quite nailing it. My throat tightened, but I forced my voice steady. "I think you've got the wrong place. I booked this for tonight." A pause, then insistence. No, I've got it booked. The owner sent me the code." The words slid over me like oil. I remembered the host's text that morning, her cheerful confirmation. They were lying, and the lie was so deliberate it made my skin crawl. "Call the owner," I said. "I spoke to her. I'm staying here." Another pause. Then the second voice, lower, quieter, too calm. "Can you just open the door so we can figure it out?" For one wild second, my hand twitched toward the knob. I wanted to believe, but something deep in me, old and sharp as bone, hissed, "Don't be stupid." The words were so clear I almost turned to see if someone else had spoken them aloud. My mother's voice, my mother's phrase, "Don't be stupid." "My husband's in the back," I blurted. "He'll deal with this." Silence. Heavy. Waiting. I edged the curtain aside. One man stood on the porch, hood shadowing his face. The other paced the end of the drive, scanning the road. There was no car, no phone in their hands. Just them. Standing. Waiting. I locked myself in the bedroom, fingers trembling as I dialed 911. The dispatcher answered, her calm tone slicing through my panic like thread through cloth. I whispered the story, gave the address, begged her to hurry. 15 minutes, she said. Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone but law enforcement. 15 minutes. My chest tightened. Outside, the man on the porch was gone. When I whispered this into the phone, my voice cracked. The dispatcher told me to move somewhere safe. I crept toward the kitchen, toward the sliding glass door. That's when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap against the glass. Not a knock. A test. They're at the back, I whispered. Bathroom. Lock the door, she instructed. I obeyed. The bathroom had no window, just the vent fan humming faintly. I sat on the cold tile floor, hand clamped over my mouth. Then came the knock at the front door again, the same falsely cheerful voice. Sorry about earlier. Wrong house, our mistake. No one apologizes like that. Not while circling a house in the dark. The minutes stretched into rope, pulling tighter around my chest. The dispatcher kept me tethered, her voice steady. But my thoughts frayed. What if they weren't men at all? What if they were something else, something that only wore the shape of men? The mildew smell in the house felt thicker, like breath on the back of my neck. By the time the deputies arrived, 22 minutes, not 15, I was shredded inside. They found nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks. Just pine needles scattered on gravel, and me, pale and shaking. They suggested confusion, pranks, misunderstandings. I signed their clipboard, listened to their rehearsed reassurances, and started packing. That's when I saw it. On the nightstand, beside the bed where I'd left my phone, sat a paperback. I was sure it hadn't been there before. Its cover bent, spine cracked, pages smelling faintly of damp. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. On the first page, written in cramped, deliberate handwriting, were 4 words. Don't be stupid. The handwriting was my mother's. Exactly my mother's. The sharp loop of her Y's, the hard downstroke of her T's, the way the ink bled where she pressed too hard. I knew it. I had grown up seeing it on grocery lists, birthday cards, notes pinned to the fridge. And now it was here, in a book I had never touched, in a house my mother had never known, written in the exact words I had heard in my head when my hand hovered on the doorknob. I dropped the book. My body knew before my brain caught up. Whatever had been at the door wasn't random. It wasn't just 2 men. It had known me all my life. It had been behind me in childhood bedrooms, whispering in my mother's voice when I thought I was safe. I fled, drove until the coast unrolled gray and salt-scented in front of me, until dawn bled through the clouds. But even now I don't just hear the knock or the tap on the glass. I hear my mother's voice, low and certain, curling through me like smoke. Don't be stupid. And sometimes in the moments when I am most tired, I swear I can feel someone else moving behind my eyes, watching me remember. Tap, tap, tap. I never thought I would be the kind of woman to let strangers into my life, let alone my father's house, but grief makes you do things you swore you'd never do. I told myself it was practical, responsible even. But if I'm honest, there was always something wrong with that house. Something that never let me forget I was trespassing in a place that wasn't fully mine, even though the deed had my name on it. It started 4 years ago, after my dad died. He left me the house on Birch Hollow Lane in Somerville, a sleepy little town in upstate New York, the kind of place people forget exists until their car breaks down there. At the time, I was living 2 hours south in Fairpoint with my husband Mark, balancing a full-time job at the hospital, long commutes, and the numb routine of adulthood. The house was too big for us, too full of shadows and memories for me to live in. But I couldn't bring myself to sell it. Selling felt like cutting away the last thread that tied me to my dad, and I wasn't ready for that kind of silence. At first, I thought about renting it out long-term, but then a friend mentioned how much money her brother was making with Airbnb. People want quiet old houses like that, she said. They'll pay just to pretend they're living someone else's life for a weekend. I laughed at the time, but she wasn't wrong. I put up a listing. Pictures of the brick chimney, the wraparound porch, the backyard where my dad used to pace at night when he thought I was asleep. Within a week, I had my first booking, then another, and another. It worked. For a while, it really worked. The money was better than expected, enough to cover repairs, bills, even a vacation or 2. I told myself Dad would have approved, that he'd like the house being used instead of locked up like a mausoleum. But sometimes when I was lying awake in my apartment in Fairpoint, I'd picture the house lit up at night with strangers inside and feel this strange pang, like I had left my child with the wrong babysitter. I'd imagine them opening drawers, walking barefoot across the creaking upstairs floor, maybe pausing at the hallway where the wallpaper always peeled no matter how many times we patched it. The house remembered things. That's how it felt. The guests were mostly fine. Some complained about silly things, the smell of old wood, the sound of wind through the trees, the uneven floors. A few left beer cans everywhere. One couple broke a lamp and didn't say anything. Annoying, yes, but manageable. I never met most of them in person anyway. There was a keypad on the front door. I texted them the code before check-in and waited for the "thanks, we're in" message. Easy. Nothing really bad happened until last July. I just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital, the kind that left me bone-tired and shaky. I was brushing my teeth when I got a message from the guest staying that night. Caleb M. His profile picture was of a smiling blonde guy with a baseball cap. He'd booked a one-night stay with his girlfriend. The message was simple. "Hey, we just got here. House looks great, thanks again." I typed back, "No problem, enjoy your stay," and thought nothing of it. Half an hour later, another buzz. "Hey, quick question, the water's not working." That jolted me a little. The house wasn't modern by any stretch, but the plumbing had never failed. I called him. His voice was calm, polite. "Yeah, we just tried the bathroom and there's no water. Like, nothing at all. No pressure." "Was it working earlier?" I asked. "Didn't try it until now. We unpacked, went out for food, just got back." I rubbed my eyes. "Okay, look, I can drive out there. Might be the well pump or pressure switch. Shouldn't take long." He apologized, thanked me, said he appreciated it. I told Mark I was heading out and he groaned from under the covers. "Do it in the morning." I shook my head. "If it's simple, I'd rather fix it now. Don't want them leaving a bad review." The drive was quiet, the road lined with dark trees and barns that looked abandoned even in daylight. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway, it was close to 10. That's when I noticed something odd. 2 cars in the drive. A beat-up Honda and a black SUV. Caleb's note had said he and his girlfriend were driving up from Albany. Why 2 cars? I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe they'd brought friends. Technically against the rules, but I wasn't going to raise hell if it was just for one night. I grabbed my flashlight, punched in the code, and stepped inside. "Hello?" I called. No answer. The house was dim. A couple of lights on upstairs, but no sound. No laughter, no TV, no footsteps. Just silence. I made my way to the basement because that's where the main water valve was. The air was musty, the kind of damp smell that clung to your hair and clothes. The furnace loomed against the wall, same one my dad used to curse at every winter. I crouched, aimed the flashlight, and froze. The valve was shut off, completely turned clockwise. That wasn't something that happened on its own. I twisted it open, and the pipes groaned back to life. Water rushed through them, echoing faintly in the walls. I stood there a moment, trying to make sense of it. Why would anyone turn it off? None of the guests would even know where it was. That's when I heard it. Footsteps overhead, slow, heavy, more than one set. I clicked off the flashlight, heart hammering. The basement door creaked open above me. I held my breath, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. "Is it working now?" The voice was deep, older, not Caleb's. 3 men appeared at the top of the stairs. Shadows stretched down the walls as they descended. Middle-aged, rough-looking, one with a cap pulled low. Their eyes locked on me. None of them were Caleb. None of them were supposed to be there. I forced my voice steady. "Yeah, should be fine now. Valve must have gotten stuck." They didn't answer, just stared. I moved slowly toward the stairs, every muscle taut. "Well, I'll get out of your way. Call me if anything else comes up." As I passed them, I caught a glimpse of something tucked into the waistband of the man in the cap. A revolver. I don't remember how I kept walking, how I didn't scream or run. I just moved, got to the door, stepped outside, made it to my car, locked the doors, drove. I didn't breathe until I hit the gas station 10 miles down the road. That's when things began to unravel. The police searched the house. Nothing. The cars were gone. The men gone. The lock code had been changed from the inside, which should have been impossible. I was the only one with access to the app. They found rope in the basement, duct tape, zip ties. Not mine. The listing had been booked with a stolen card. The profile was fake. None of it led anywhere. And yet that wasn't the part that keeps me awake at night. It's what I found 2 days later when I finally worked up the nerve to go back with Mark. The water valve was turned off again, and on the concrete wall beside it, in my dad's handwriting, were the words, "You should never have let them in." I've always believed that family vacations were supposed to be the kind of memories you carried like little treasures, the ones you could take out years later, polish in your mind, and smile at, even when life got heavy. At least that's what I told myself the summer before I started 6th grade, when my parents rented a beach house for a week in Brighton Cove, North Carolina. I was 11 years old, restless and hopeful, and too young to realize that sometimes the things you think will hold your family together are the same things that quietly break it apart. My name is Evan, though my mom always called me Evie when she wanted me to pay attention. That week, I remember hearing my name more often than I should have, sometimes in a voice that didn't sound like hers. Brighton Cove wasn't some glossy, postcard-perfect place with neon arcades and endless ice cream shops. It was quieter than that, almost forgotten in places. The houses were weather-beaten, the boardwalk sagged with old wood that smelled of salt and mildew, and the air carried a heaviness that clung to your clothes no matter how many times you shook them out. My mother, Lorna, said she loved the idea of waking up to the sound of waves outside her window. My father, Rick, just liked that it was cheaper than a hotel. My older brother, Caleb, 18 and already halfway out of the family with his smokes and secret girlfriends, didn't say much at all. Mason, my younger brother, was 7 and still lived in that wide-eyed place where everything was either magical or terrifying. I sat in between them, invisible most of the time, caught between childhood and something darker I didn't yet have a name for. The house looked different from the pictures. Smaller, paler. The shutters hung crooked like tired eyelids, and the pale blue paint peeled in strips that flapped slightly in the sea breeze. Mom called it charming, and I tried to believe her. Inside, the air was damp and sour, the way wood smells when it has held too many storms. The furniture was mismatched, the curtains faded, and the floors groaned like something alive shifting beneath us. Mason and I claimed the bunk bedroom, tiny and tight with a window that looked out at nothing but the peeling side wall of the house next door. Caleb got the bigger room across the hall with a TV that didn't work, though he pretended it did, lying on the bed with the screen glowing static. My parents took the master bedroom with the balcony that looked out toward the ocean, though you could never quite see it directly, just a shifting shimmer of water between other houses and dunes. The first night felt ordinary enough. We ate sandwiches on the deck while the sun bled into the water. Dad drank a beer and said, "Not bad, Lorna. Not bad at all." Mason fell asleep curled against me on the couch before it even got fully dark. The hum of the hot tub filled the night like some mechanical heartbeat. But then came the noise. It was faint at first, almost nothing, like a long drawn-out scrape somewhere upstairs followed by a clicking sound. Not loud, but sharp. Dad frowned and stood, muttering something about the old place settling, but his voice was too tight. He went up to check. I don't know why I followed, maybe because I was afraid of what I'd hear if I stayed behind. The upstairs hallway was darker than it should have been. Light leaked from under Caleb's door where his music thudded faintly. I heard the scrape again, closer this time. Dad checked the rooms one by one, opening closets, muttering about drafts and old wood. Everything looked normal, except the closet in the master bedroom, where the door hung open a few inches. Mom had closed it earlier. I was sure of that. I remember the smell first, before the sight. Something stale, metallic, like rusted nails and old sweat. Then Dad pushed the door wider, and I thought I saw a shape shift in the dark. My heart pounded so loud I thought the thing, whatever it was, would hear. But the closet was empty. Dad laughed too quickly and said, "See? Nothing." But when he shut the door, I swear I heard a breath behind it, slow and steady, like someone pretending to sleep. That night I couldn't close my eyes. The bunk bed creaked every time Mason moved, and the walls seemed too thin, like they were holding something back instead of keeping us safe. The days should have been easier. The ocean was right there, the sand soft and hot, the boardwalk sticky with spilled soda. But Brighton Cove had a way of making even sunlight feel fragile. The houses loomed with blind windows, the locals stared too long, and whenever I turned my head fast enough, I could swear I saw someone ducking just out of sight. At night, things were worse. The scraping sound returned, sometimes from the walls, sometimes the ceiling. Caleb swore it was just the wind, but one night I saw his face pale as paper when a loud knock echoed from inside the wall of his room. Sleep stopped coming. My mom looked tired too, shadows smudged under her eyes. She told me not to tell Mason scary stories, but I hadn't said a word. He was already having nightmares, waking up crying about the man in the corner. When I asked what man, he'd go silent and refuse to look at the window. I told myself he was just being a little kid. Except one night, I woke up to find him standing at the window, his hand pressed to the glass, whispering, "I don't want to go with you." The house was doing something to us. I started noticing little things out of place. A chair angled differently. The TV remote moved from where I left it. My sneakers lined neatly at the foot of the bed when I'd kicked them off messy. Once, I found wet sand on the stairs in the morning, even though none of us had gone out since the evening before. Mom said maybe Caleb tracked it in, but when I asked him, he looked at me blankly and said he hadn't been downstairs at all. The verifiable moment came the night before everything broke. We were in the living room, trying to distract Mason with a board game, when I noticed the framed photograph above the mantel. It was of some family we didn't know, smiling in front of the very same house, a decade earlier maybe. When we first arrived, I'd stared at it long enough to notice the daughter's braces and the dad's sunburned nose. Perfectly ordinary. But that night, there was something else in the photo, faint but unmistakable, a shadowy face peeking out from behind the family. Not a smudge, not a trick of light. A face. Eyes pale and too wide, mouth slightly open, as if it had been hiding there all along. I didn't tell Mason. I couldn't. The last night, everything collapsed. The sounds turned into full footsteps pacing the hallway. The doors rattled. The deck door slammed open, though it was locked. Mom clutched us close while Dad shouted into the dark, swearing he'd shoot whoever was in the house. Caleb finally broke, screaming that he couldn't take it, that the house wanted us gone. Then the lights went out, plunging us into blackness so thick it felt like water closing in. That's when it spoke. Not loudly, not in some booming ghost voice, just a whisper, curling into the dark like smoke. It said, "Rick, you should have stayed with your dad." My father went rigid, his breath sucked sharp through his teeth. Nobody knew that secret. Not even Mom. His father had died when he was young and he'd never spoken of it. Yet the voice knew. The voice chose. And in that instant, I understood. This wasn't a draft, or a dream, or a house full of creaks. It was something that watched us. Something that had always been watching. The next minutes blurred. Dad bleeding from his arm, though no one had touched him. Mom's voice calling my name from two different directions at once. Mason sobbing that he didn't want to be taken. Caleb grabbed me, screaming that we had to go, and we ran, stumbling through the dark, banging into walls, the air itself pressing down like wet cloth. We fled down the stairs, the front door yawning wide as if it had been waiting. As we spilled out into the night, breathless and broken, some desperate pull made all of us glance back at once. And there he was. A man-shaped figure stood in the doorway, blacker than the blackness around it, his head cocked just like I'd seen in the closet. His eyes caught the thin slice of moonlight, pale, round, and watching. For the first time all week, every single one of us saw him. Mom gasped. Dad cursed under his breath. Even Caleb whispered, "Oh God." And then the door slammed shut, leaving only the sound of the waves and the echo of our own breathing. We drove until morning without speaking. We never went back. But sometimes when I hear the scrape above my ceiling at night, I wonder if leaving the house was enough. Because I know the truth now, and so does my family. Brighton Cove gave us one memory we'll never polish into something sweet. It gave us a shared vision, a shared secret, a shared scar. And scars don't fade. I should have felt nothing but excitement when I pulled off the highway that night. But the truth is, the desert already had me on edge before I even saw the house. There's a kind of silence out there that doesn't sound like peace. Not to me, at least. It sounds like the world holding its breath, waiting for something. I told myself I was just tired from the 8-hour drive, that the low hum in my stomach was nerves about the interview, but deep down I knew it wasn't that simple. Some part of me, the part that notices things I'd rather ignore, had already started whispering, "You don't belong here." My name's Rachel, and if you'd asked me back then what I wanted most in life, I would have told you stability. Not fame, not money, just the steady ground of a career that didn't feel like it could vanish overnight. I'd been freelancing for years, scraping together contracts for a small agency in California, every month juggling invoices and late payments in the uneasy quiet between jobs. Then in January of 2022, like a mirage in the desert, an email appeared in my inbox. An interview with a boutique firm I'd admired from afar, a place I'd secretly believed was too far out of my league. They weren't in LA or San Francisco or New York, though. They were tucked away in a small town in New Mexico, not far from Albuquerque. Remote enough that if I wanted to show up in person, and I did desperately, I needed somewhere cheap to stay. Airbnb solved that. At least it seemed to. The listing had looked harmless, even charming. A one-story adobe guest house, muted clay walls, big backyard with desert views. Review after review mentioned the same two things, solitude and sunrise. Both sounded perfect to me. The host, George M., messaged me the morning after I booked. Just a flat, polite line. "Hi Rachel, check-in instructions are in the app. Let me know if you need anything. Enjoy your stay." No smiley face, no chatter, no personal touch. At the time I was relieved. I didn't want small talk. I just wanted a bed, a roof, and a few days of quiet to focus. I stopped for gas in town before heading out. The station was nearly empty, humming with fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee thick in the air. The attendant, a man maybe in his 50s with a baseball cap pulled low, looked at my California plates as I filled up. "You staying out by Cerro Azul?" he asked. I blinked. "Yeah, actually. Airbnb out that way." He nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he already suspected. "Just watch the nights out there. Gets quiet. Too quiet, if you ask me." Then, as if realizing how strange that sounded, he added quickly, "You'll love the stars, though. Best skies you'll ever see." He gave me a smile that looked kind but strained, like it was trying to hide something. I told myself he was just lonely, trying to make conversation, but the way he watched me pull away in my car lingered with me longer than it should have. The house stood at the end of a gravel driveway off a road that barely qualified as a road. My GPS had glitched as I approached, spinning its little arrow, as if it wasn't sure I should be here at all. The street sign was rusted, nearly illegible. Cerro Azul Lane. No neighbors, no traffic, no porch lights in sight. Just desert. Flat, empty, endless. When I stepped inside, I had to admit it was nicer than the pictures. Clean. A kitchenette, a small living space, a single bedroom with mirrored closet doors. The windows were large, curtains drawn open, the desert pressed right up against the glass. It should have felt spacious, but instead it made me feel exposed, like someone could be standing out there in the dark watching me. I tried to laugh it off. Classic city girl paranoia. Still, I closed the curtains before I unpacked. I noticed something odd while setting my suitcase by the dresser. My toothbrush, which I'd packed in the side pocket of my duffel, was lying loose on top of my folded clothes. I stared at it for a moment. Had I left it like that? Maybe it had shifted during the drive. I shook my head and shoved it into the bathroom cup, telling myself it was nothing. But I felt that first small flicker of doubt about my own memory, my own awareness. I spent that first evening rehearsing for the interview, sipping tea, asking myself the kinds of questions you say out loud, even though no one's there to hear the answer. Why do you want this job? What's your greatest weakness? Tell me about a time you solved a problem under pressure. My voice sounded strange in the silence, as if the walls didn't quite want to hold it. Around 8:30 I heard it. Tap. Soft, quick, unmistakable. It came from the front window, just left of the door. I froze, my mouth still open on the half-formed words of my answer. For a moment I told myself it was a moth, a bug, some desert insect slamming its body against the glass. That made sense. But I couldn't stop staring at the black square of the window. Out there was nothing. No glow from distant houses, no headlights, no moon that night. Just blank space, thick and absolute. I walked over, trying to be practical, and flicked the porch light on. The yellow glow spread across the gravel. Empty. No movement. No sound. Still, I locked the door again, even though I knew it was already locked. I told myself that would be the end of it. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight slicing through the blinds, warm and sharp. All my fear seemed ridiculous in daylight. I drove into town, nailed the interview, or at least convinced myself I had, and spent the afternoon trying to unwind at a taqueria. The food was good, but the air had that faint, dry smell of sand and exhaust, and I kept catching myself staring at the horizon. Too flat, too empty, as if something was hiding just out of sight. Back at the house, I sat in the backyard patio with my laptop, the desert stretching forever beyond the low fence. The quiet was supposed to help me focus, but instead it left me hyper-aware of every small sound. The crunch of gravel under my chair, the faint hiss of wind through the brush. And then that feeling crept over me, the one you can't reason away, the sensation of being watched. It crawled up the back of my neck until I had to turn and look. Nothing behind me. Nothing across the desert. Just me and a silence that didn't feel empty. I went inside before dark. That night the tapping came again, louder this time. Intentional. I crept to the peephole. No one. I flicked on the porch light. Still no one. And then, just as I started to breathe again, a sharp click from the dark beyond the fence. Not a twig breaking, not an animal. The deliberate sound of someone clicking their tongue. I froze. Slowly, I turned my head toward the backyard, and I saw him. 40 feet away, half hidden in the brush, a figure stood completely still. No flashlight, no phone glow. Just a shape in the dark, watching. In one hand, he held something small, catching the faintest glint of porch light. A camera. Adrenaline lit me up. I heard my own voice before I could think, steady but louder than I intended. "You're on private property, I'm calling the police." The figure moved, but not the way I expected. No panic, no scramble. Just a slow, calm turn, and a walk back into the desert until he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The next day I stayed inside, curtains drawn, my laptop dark on the counter. Once, going into the bathroom, I noticed a faint smudge across the mirrored closet door, like a handprint dragged down the glass. I reached out, touched it. It was oily, not mine. Not fresh, but not old either. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Had I missed that before? Had it been there the whole time? By evening, my exhaustion drowned out logic, and I let myself crawl into bed with Better Call Saul playing on my laptop. The glow filled the room, soothing enough that I finally reached over and turned out the light. That's when I heard it. Click. Not from outside. From inside. From the closet. I sat up, every nerve screaming. The mirrored door was open an inch. Hadn't I left it open earlier? Maybe. But this sound, this was different. Another click, closer this time, soft and deliberate, followed by what I swear was a faint, stifled laugh. I bolted, barefoot, phone in hand. I sprinted out the front door and into the car. I locked the doors, shaking so badly I could barely tap the screen to call 911. I sat there with the dispatcher's voice in my ear, staring at the house, convinced any second the front door would open and someone would step out. But no one did. When the deputy arrived, we went in together. His flashlight swept the corners, the closet, the attic crawl space, even under the bed. Empty. No signs of forced entry. But when he paused at the door, he said something that made my blood turn to ice. These smart locks, you can add codes remotely. If the owner's shady, he could give himself access. Erase it later. I left that night. Hotel an hour away. Barely slept. I reported it all to Airbnb. They told me they couldn't verify whether George M. had accessed the lock remotely. The host messaged me once. Sorry you felt unsafe. No one else has ever had issues. Hope you're okay. That was it. No investigation, no follow-up. But here's the thing that won't leave me. The figure I saw in the desert. What if he never left? What if he wasn't outside at all? Not really. What if he was already in the house waiting? I tried to drive back to California the next morning, but just as I pulled onto the empty highway, the rising sun burning behind me, I caught something in my rearview mirror. A blinking red light fixed to a post at the end of the gravel drive. A camera. And then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. No name. One word. Thanks.